Alright guys, today I've got this 2002 Toyota Sequoia and it's in desperate need of some lower ball joints. So let me get it in the shop and I'm going to show you guys how to check the ball joints and how to replace them, as well as a few tips and tricks that I've learned as far as what brand and what parts you need to buy to get the job done right. So let's get into it. Okay, so I've got the front of the truck jacked up. As you can see, we got one lower ball joint here, passenger side. Then we got the driver's side over there. Now, and just so you know, the '01 to '07 Sequoia and the 2000 to 2006 Tundra, they're basically identical, the same process to change them out. So you can follow these steps for either of those vehicles. So here's the ball joint lower. So in order to check it, what you want to do is you want to jack up the front of the truck and get the wheel just a couple inches off the ground. Now, obviously, when you do this, please be safe. Use jack stands, chalk your wheels. Make sure you're not in a position to where if the truck were to fall, you would get crushed or hurt. So what you basically want to do is take a long pry bar like this. This is a 36-inch long pry bar. And you want to either get yourself or an assistant to place the pry bar under the tire and apply force upward like this. And as you're doing that, look at the ball joint and check for any play or any movement in the ball joint. You could also take the pry bar and you could go from the inside too. It doesn't matter if you're doing the outside or the inside, it'll all be the same. Okay, so I've got the pry bar underneath the tire, so I'm going to pry up on it. And as you can see, the one over here on the passenger side is pretty tight. I'm not seeing any movement at all. Okay, so I'm switching over now to the driver's side. I'm going to do the same thing to the driver's side and you'll see the issue here. You can even hear it clunking while I'm doing this. And the bad thing about this is these ball joints were actually just done about 40,000 miles ago. As you can see, the passenger side one is okay, but the driver's side one has failed very quickly. And if you want to know the problem here, well, it's written right there on the side of the ball joint, on the boot. And just to be clear, if you have one of these trucks, you shouldn't have any play up and down like that in the ball joint at all. They should be tight. And if you do own one of these vehicles, I recommend that you check the ball joints if you've never checked them, because you guys can go online, you can look at forums and stuff, and you can read that these things are notorious. When the ball joints get worn out like this, they're known for completely coming out of the socket. The wheel goes sideways when you're driving, and it's very dangerous. It's a safety issue. Wheel goes sideways on you, it's going to cause a lot more damage than just a broken ball joint. So if you notice that yours is loose like this at all, you're definitely going to want to get it replaced. You can also read online a lot of people that have had bad experience with moved ball joints on these trucks for whatever reason. We see a lot of moved ball joints failing on these at early mileage, like how this one did. So really and truthfully, if you're going to do this job, there's only one proper brand of part to use, which is the original Toyota. And right and left side, they are different part numbers. But this right here is a ball joint from Toyota, straight from the dealership. And this is what you're going to want to use if you've got a Sequoia or a Tundra and you need lower ball joints. Now, they are going to be about double the price of the Moogs, but you know what they say, buy once, cry once. You don't want to have to do this job again, and you don't want to be in a position where the ball joint comes apart on you because you used a cheaper aftermarket. So just do it right the first time, use OEM, and they will last you a very long time. And you can even buy the bolts that hold the lower ball joint in place. I recommend this if your old ones are very rusty. Maybe a good idea. They're pretty cheap. They're like a couple dollars a piece. And these, as you can see, they're kind of a funny shape and size, but they're actually not that difficult to replace. So let's go ahead and get into it. So step one is going to be to remove the wheel and tire. More than likely, you're going to have a 21 millimeter lug nut. So with the wheel off, you can get a little bit of a better view of what we're trying to do here. It's not too bad of a job, but I would say the first thing that we're probably going to want to do is let's get the tie rod off. That way we can swivel it around as needed without any obstruction. So there's a cotter pin here that I'm going to need to remove. Now this castle nut here is a 21 millimeter, but it's aftermarket, so the stock factory nut might be a 17 or a 19 or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm gonna remove that. At this point, in order to remove the tie rod from the ball joint, the way that I do it is take a hammer and hit it on the ball joint. Don't hit the tie rod, just hit the ball joint part. Hit it a few times and it should pop loose. If not, there's a lot of rust or something and it's just not coming off. I mean, it should if you hit it enough times pretty hard. But if it doesn't, then you may have to use a separator tool. But let's see if it'll come off this way. Okay, now that this is separated, let's go ahead and get the cotter pin out of the lower ball joint here. And this castle nut here is a 27 millimeter, but it is aftermarket. Like I said, the stock size, I don't remember if it's 27, 24, 22. I think it might be a 24, but either way, you'll need a pretty big socket. I'm gonna go ahead and bust this loose. Now to separate the ball joint from the lower control arm, you will need a fork or a separator kind of like this. You can go in from this side, you can go in from the other side, it really doesn't matter. It's just whatever works for you. With the tie rod off, you can manipulate the steering knuckle any which way you want. So I'm actually going to go from this way here because I'm left-handed, so I need to be able to swing the hammer with my left hand and come in here and just hit it with the hammer, drive it through. I'm not worried about damaging this boot because obviously the ball joint's going to be replaced anyway. Got to give it a few real good hits. And at this point, the whole steering knuckle is pretty much loose, but you don't have to worry about the ABS sensors, brake lines, or any of that stuff because the upper ball joint is still holding the steering knuckle in place, so it's not just going to drop down and fall. Now these bolts here, you could probably remove them when you still have the ball joint attached. So that is another way you can do it. I'll show you guys that way when I do it on the other side. I'm using air tools to take these bolts out, so I'm not too worried about trying to fight these with hand tools or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to do it this way for this side. For the other side, I'll do it the other way, and then you guys can decide for yourself which order you want to do things in. Now these 4 bolts here, they are 14 millimeter. It would help if I go the right way. Alright. And if the ball joint doesn't just fall out of it like how I did here, you probably have to take a pry bar and just put it in between the steering knuckle and the ball joint and pry down and it should come off. Okay, I'm over here on the passenger side now. Let's try method number 2 and let's take off these 14s first and then let's separate the ball joint. As you can see, I've already got the tie rod off and everything, so let's just try method number 2, take these bolts off first and let's see if it makes it any easier. And now you may be asking, well, hang on a second, I thought the passenger side was good and it was only the driver's side that was worn out. Yes, that's true. But after seeing the left ball joint fail at 40,000 miles, the customer wants OEM ball joints installed on both sides, so that's what we're going to do. Now, of course, if you're using hand tools, you'll probably need a socket with an extension, maybe like a 3-inch or 4-inch extension, maybe. that was exciting. I'll be honest, I think I actually like doing that method better than the first one that I did. I think it was a little bit easier. I'll go look in just a second and I'll see what the book procedure actually states to do. I'll mention two I didn't mention earlier, but two of the holes on these things, right here where my thumb is and right up here, they have dowel pins. So the dowel pins are supposed to go in the front holes closer to the brake rotors. Just make sure too, when you remove the ball joints, they'll more than likely come out with the ball joint, but if you have a dowel pin that gets stuck behind, you're gonna have to get it out. Because the new ball joint, it comes with the dowel pins installed. Any ball joint, whether it's Moog or OEM, they're gonna have the two dowel pins installed. So I printed out the OEM procedure from Mitchell Pro Demand. And yeah, this is what it says. So apparently they do want you to loosen those 4 bolts first, but they don't want you to completely remove the bolts. I guess that's so that when you separate the ball joint from the control arm, it doesn't come flying off like how it did on me that last time. And then after that, separate it from the lower control arm and then remove the 4 bolts and remove it. So yeah, it looks like pretty much method number 2 is the way that they want you to do it. So when you go back together with the new ball joints, the good thing that you'll notice about them is they are different, but they are labeled. One of them says L, see it says L5, but anyway, L is for left and R is for right. So they are labeled left and right. Even the aftermarket ball joints, they're labeled left and right. And remember, left and right is always determined from sitting in the driver's seat. And if you buy the lower ball joints at the dealer, they do come with a new nut and a cotter pin. And here's the new bolts for the ball joint. I have 8 of them. At least I hope I do. Yeah, I do have 8. So anyway, let me run back through this. I'm gonna put these back together. I'm gonna show you guys the torque specs and everything. So let's get into it. Okay, so I'm over here on the right passenger side. The way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna go ahead and just put the ball joint to the steering knuckle. Line up the dowel pins. Gonna get that in there. And then I'm just going to loosely attach the bolts. I'm not gonna torque them down quite yet until I get everything together. Now I'll go ahead and position it where I can put it through the lower control arm. Just kind of lift up on it and insert it. Now I'll go ahead and put the new castle nut on there. Now when I tighten this castle nut up, I'm gonna do one thing here. So if you notice the little hole that's in the ball joint, that's obviously to put the cotter pin through. So when I tighten it, I'm actually gonna hold it kind of straight like that. Yeah, about like that. And I wanna tighten it up like that. That way the hole is gonna be pretty much, you know, straight through front to back. And that way it'll be easy to get the cotter pin in and out. I mean, it really doesn't matter, to be honest, where the hole is positioned, but I like to have it centered kind of like that. That way it's not facing against the wheel rotor and the backing plate and all that. But I mean, like I said, it really doesn't matter. I mean, you'll be able to get it in and out either way. All right, let me loosely tighten this one up too. I'm gonna go ahead and torque these bolts up here and then I'll torque this one. So these 4 bolts, they get torqued to 59 foot-pounds. The lower nut gets torqued to 103 foot-pounds. Go. So now as you can see, I torqued the nut and it's still not quite lined up with the hole. So I'm going to turn it a little bit more so I can get the hole to line up. It's not really going to make too much of a difference on the torque, to be honest. But okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get the new cotter pin through. And I like to put the long side of the cotter pin down. That way I can grab it, pull it down. And wrap it over. and then I'll push this top one up like that. Okay, now the tie rod here, same thing. I kind of like to face the hole front to back, but it doesn't really matter too much, I guess. Tie rod's gonna go through the bottom like so. And this nut here is going to get torqued to 67 foot-pounds. So I'm going to give it a little bit more to line up the hole so I can get the cotter pin. And of course I'm going to use a new cotter pin. Well, in this case it would be the long side faces the top. I'm going to bend it over. Bend this one down, and on this cotter pin I just grabbed it from a set that we had here in the shop. So I'm actually, it's a little bit too long, so I'm just going to trim off the excess with some dikes. There. Here we go, just to kind of make it look good. Anyway, that's kind of how it looks right there. So we're pretty much back together here on this right passenger side, except for the wheel, obviously. But anyway, as we can see now, both sides are done, passenger side. And then I went ahead and I did the driver's side off camera just because it's exactly the same as the passenger side. And it takes me like 4 times longer if I'm filming it, so I just kind of wanted to get it done. But anyway, both sides are exactly the same. Got my cotter pins in here, got my cotter pins in up here. Everything is torqued, everything is tight. So I just have one final tip for you guys. When you're removing and disassembling all this, sometimes inevitably happens to where you bend this backing plate and you bend it in such a way to where it touches the rotor. So you're gonna wanna double check that. So look, like right here, the backing plate is bent and it's touching a little bit on the rotor here. So definitely double check that before you put the wheels on. Bend the backing plate back out to where it's not touching on the rotor. Check both sides, check all around, and make sure that that plate isn't touching. Otherwise, when you go back together with it and start driving, you'll immediately start hearing a noise and you're gonna wonder what it is, what went wrong. 9 times out of 10, this is the problem. So check that before you put it back together. Another thing that you may notice about these ball joints is that there's no grease fitting on them. The OEM ball joints, they do not have a grease fitting. If you look at the Moogs and a lot of the aftermarkets, there is a grease fitting right here on the side. So I guess Toyota thinks their ball joints are so good they don't need to be greased, which I don't know, we'll see. They should last a long time. It calls for 81 foot-pounds. Alright, so we're pretty much done with this job. Now with any front end work, you're going to want to get an alignment afterwards because disassembling all that will throw off your alignment angles a little bit. Now I am curious about this ball joint. This is the one that was giving us all the trouble. I kind of want to open it up and see what's the deal here. Well, it definitely had grease in it. Man, but this thing is about to pop out. Yeah, I was wondering if this thing was dry because I was pretty sure these have been greased at some point. So definitely check these ball joints out, and if they've got any play in them at all, go ahead and get them replaced before it's too late. So that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found the video helpful. If you guys have any comments or questions, leave them down below, and I'll see you next time.